Hey, everyone. Be advised, everything you say, do, write, and put on the web can be used by an AI for training. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, and I am really happy to be telling you I am recording this at PlatformCon in-person day in New York City. We'll be here all day. We'll be streaming live later, so do check. Well, by the time you're watching this, it won't be live, but you'll be able to watch it on recording, hopefully. But we're here all day talking to some great people. It's a vibrant, high-energy crowd at PlatformCon in New York City, so good stuff. But we're here for Techstrong Gang. We've got some, as usual, a good bunch of AI news and different things going on. A little cyber here, a little AI there, a little DevOps there. Let me introduce you quickly to our gang for today. If people you've met here before, so I'm not going to do the whole dog and pony show. But we've got John Swartz, Fred Wilmot, and still in Denver, the Dean, Mike Vizard. Hey, gentlemen, how are you?
Good.
Doing great, brother.
Good.
I'm heading to the airport right after this.
Good for you. I'm glad you'll be going home. I'm actually going to be in New York all weekend, so looking forward to being home. Still home for me. Guys, let's just jump right into it, though. I don't know if I should use the term a landmark ruling. Is this the high water mark for AI court rulings? Is this just the beginning? But a court has ruled that Anthropic using books and other material to train their AI is perfectly fine. Even though those books don't belong to them, they're not compensating the people whose IP it is. We don't know if the books were obtained, even paid for, or just pirated.
They were
paid for.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mike. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to kick this to John really quickly, but yeah, it seems to be that the court is saying as long as you bought the book and you didn't steal it, you can do whatever you damn well want with it. But John,
yeah, that's basically that's basically just so. As Alan said, this is potentially a landmark, but there are some caveats and some howevers in the decision that leave the door open for other different interpretations. So basically, just to recap, there's a federal judge in Northern California who ruled that Anthropic's use of legally purchased books to train Claude does not violate federal copyright law. And he's basically saying the use of these books to train LLMs was essentially transformative and did not violate the fair use doctrine under copyright law. So one of the key phrases here in the decision, there was a lot of hyperbole, was that authors complained. There are 3 authors who sued Anthropic. Their complaint is no different than it would be if they complained that training school children to write well would result in an explosion of competing works. So they're saying basically that if you legally purchase the content, you can use it for training purposes. And the authors themselves, there are 3 authors, they had thought and interpreted what Anthropic was doing as large-scale theft. But here's the caveat. So the judge, whose name is Alsop, said that Anthropic may have broken the law when it separately downloaded millions of pirated books, and it will face a separate trial in December over that issue. He also said that the decision does not address whether the output of an AI model infringe copyrights, which is an issue in related cases. One last thing I'm going to mention is that the court documents show that Anthropic knew there was something up and they had to change course. The Anthropic employees initially were concerned about the legality of using pirate sites to access books. So they had brought in a former Google executive in charge of Google Books, which is a searchable library of digitized books. And they kind of changed course and legally purchased books for the content training. So, in other words, if you buy it legally, you can possibly use it, but can of worms. There are all sorts of repercussions and all sorts of different interpretations that are going to go on moving forward. This is far from settled.
John, I get what you're saying about how the judge sort of came to this decision. But, that example you said about giving children a book that was bought legally to teach them how to write properly or in a style, I think is a great example. But there's another legal theory of play here that I think is germane to the AI use case, which is that of derivative works. So it wouldn't be okay to give a book to a child and then he, in essence, takes liberties in using the exact words, plots, storylines in writing his own book. Or it is more akin to sampling in music.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'd like to see where the court came down in terms of a derivative works type of argument, that this AI, when we talk about training AI, what we're talking about is AI then regurgitating that information for someone else's IP and for someone else's use without adequately compensating the original author of that IP. And so I think this is a bad decision. In reading some of the language about it being transformative and so forth, I think this judge is an AI fan who's moving on with the magic of it. And I think if you asked him, he might say he's making what they call in the legal profession a common good argument, that the common good of having AI help society outweighs the individual IP concerns. Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that, but that's what it sounds like in reading the article.
So do I understand this correctly based on this logic? Therefore, Anthropic just needs to go send a check to the various publishers for the cost of the books it pirated, and they're good to go.
That's my interpretation. That would be the safe, prudent path for them to take. It's interesting though, because they were also pirating evidently a ton of materials, so they paid for like a small fraction of what the legitimate.
Right. I mean, going to buy all the books that you're training a large LLM on is not a trivial expense.
It's cost prohibitive. Yeah.
And that's Anthropic doing it. They're one of the, OpenAI, Anthropic. These are, let's call them ethical LLMs. We're going to talk more about ethical LLMs later. What about all the unethical ones?
Mm-hmm. It will be interesting to see if this case is appealed, and I'm sure it will be, what the interpretation of another judge will be, because I think in this case, this judge clearly gave wide latitude to AI, and I'm going to find it really hard to believe if other judges fall in line. I think there's going to be so many different interpretations. This is far from over, far from decided.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a Northern California. This is a kid in a cradle. Let me paraphrase George W. Bush, right? When he described Michael Dukakis, right? This is a guy from Massachusetts. Right, the most liberal state there. There's a Northern California judge. I think other courts and other judges might have a very different opinion here.
It was a home court decision. How about that? Or home court ruling? Or home.
Fair enough.
Right. Let's do that. Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap up this segment. Great story, by the way, John. We're going to come back, and we've got a few other things to talk about, including agents for nothing. I don't know. Chicks for free. I'm channeling Mark Knopfler. You're watching Tech Strong Gang.
Hey, folks, we're back. And yeah, to Alan's point, there's this company called Creato. I think that's how you say that. And they make a CRM, and they may not be the most widely used CRM out there, but they launched a bunch of AI agents this week. And interestingly enough, they're not charging extra for these AI agents. They're basically saying AI agents are going to be a feature and not an add-on. And one of the issues we have been seeing out there is every vendor seems to show up with some sort of AI capability that they want everybody to pay extra for. And it seems like, well, maybe that's not going to hold, because at some point somebody has to be the startup that's trying to take out the incumbent. And one way to do that is to not charge for AI agents. So, Alan, is this the market at work or what?
I think you've got to look at this in context of the world, Mike. This is a company, they're not Salesforce. They're not Siebel. They're not, they have a nice CRM. It's kind of one of the scrappy competitors. And you're going up against an 800-pound gorilla, excuse me, who's promising to, have tens of thousands of agents available for every purpose under the sun. And so how do you counter that? And since time memorial, the small guy says, I got a great idea. Let's give it away for free and we'll make it up on volume. I don't know how successful a strategy that is, but at some point, agents do become commoditized and do become part of the offering, and they will be free. At least a base set of them will. And maybe, much like open source, you'll have sort of an open core of free agents, but higher functioning ones will cost a little bit more money. I don't know. That's what I think.
I think part of the exercise here is that the margins on software are pretty good still, and I can hide the cost of the AI agent in those margins and still make a nice piece of change. And I'm just going to be curious, but I think that this is going to be a trend across the board. I think every other ISV is going to come to the same conclusion. I think for enterprises, AI may still be expensive because I got to get the GPUs, but I think the cost of those GPUs is going to be buried into the license somewhere now. Will the core license go up sometime to account for that? Maybe to maintain their previous, I don't know, Alan, what are the margins on ISVs these days? I seem to remember it was somewhere in the realm of 50%.
Net, triple net you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And and it depends with SaaS involved. Fred's probably better suited to talk about that than me. He lives it. But it, there's certainly margin there to put it in. Let's put it that way. So we inevitably, look, this is going to happen. It is just a little earlier than I thought it would. But it also remains to be seen, are these agents real? Are people going to use them? What's going on with them? And I don't mean agents in general, though I might be talking about that as well. But certainly in terms of the ones that Creato here is rolling out.
I'm kind of looking forward to using AI agents because there are just all kinds of tasks in my daily life that I just scratch my head about and go, why am I doing this? I'll give you my pet peeve example. So, you write something in Google Docs or in Word, and then, you got to load it up into WordPress. I'm like, isn't there an agent that could just do that? Just kind of like take that little thing and just, because it probably sucks up about 2 or 3 minutes, but it's just annoying as hell.
But so here's my pet peeve. Is that an AI agent or is it an API call? That, I mean, didn't we have that kind of functionality already?
I think there's a couple of interesting things about what these guys are trying to do here. The first of which is they say, we're going to allow you to build your own AI agents. And the second thing is, we'll let you choose your LLMs. That's a provocative thing. If you're doing that kind of work, you don't want to be held accountable to, which model has the highest risk. I have this custom model built for my things. This to me seems to strike at the heart of people that are doing an awful lot of AI work and have built things internally and are discerning members and say, hey, cool. I can implement what I have here already, and it is, I think, Shimmy, as you said, it is provocative to say we can encapsulate this in our SaaS budget, right? That margin, everybody that would be a funder, founder, or an investor in a SaaS project would say, if you're making less than 80%, right, you're probably doing the wrong things. So there's definitely room for that. I think the interesting part here that I still feel is pretty unknown is, what do those ballooning costs look like? This is a really big gamut to run here. If you're going to suggest you can use any model, and build your own agents, that could be very, very expensive. It could be super optimized by people that know what they're doing. It's pretty cool to see. I like the democratization of it for sure. It'll be interesting to see.
But Fred, to your point, you look at like Amazon Q. From what I remember, you could plug your own LLM. You could plug different LLMs into that. Mike, John, who is Einstein? Is that Salesforce or one of the other big guys?
Salesforce. Yes.
Einstein also allows you to plug multiple LLMs into the back end of it. So again, I think this is Credo trying to match up against the 800-pound gorilla that they compete against every day.
So, to Fred's point, I think, are folks out there building AI agents that are just going to wind up being free pieces of applications that I license? And, it feels like we're about to have this classic Bill versus buy conversation, Fred.
I think there's a whole suite of folks that, in order for people to adopt their technology, the latest thing is to build a plugin for their agent, this MCP, that agent, so on. But it remains to be seen if those are going to be widely used, right? To Alan's point earlier, we kind of just exchanged a way to interacting with, words, what we used to do with APIs. Is it better? Is it worse? Does it make more sense? Do you get the right answers? I mean, still to be determined, but I think everybody feels as though in the fleet of agents, I must have an agent that someone can interact with in my, my technology stack. So vendors, I think, are going to rush to continue to do this. And there's lots of public agents today, and there's lots of public MCP servers and all of the things that go with it. But is that a trend? Does that sort of top out? Do we get back to, hey, those things are probably not adhering to most of the general principles of security anyway, right? Is it better practice? Do you get more out of it? Like, what's the value prop there? And I think those are the questions it's fresh snow. So I don't know if we're going to see that for a little bit.
Another lesson I've learned in years in the tech world is, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I'm not talking about agents being free. I'm talking about, creating an agent to scratch every itch that you may have. It may not make sense to do that. And so, I think we're going to go through a period where we are going to try to scratch every itch. But eventually, when the cost of AI gets factored into these things, even at a B2C level, you're going to do it where it makes sense, not for everything under the sun. And that's, again, following a pattern that I've seen over 30 plus years.
Mm-hmm. And, the temptation among some of these tech companies, when I talk to them, and Cisco execs said this, that they're the thought that like 75% of your time is wasted on, like 44% of that time is wasted on repetitive tasks, like or 31% is in meetings. So they're looking at this scope of 75% of what workers do throughout their career can be replaced in some manner or form by AI agents. And that's kind of where they're coming from. It is overkill, and it will not go to that percentage for all of us, but that's how they think, I believe.
Yeah, that's just, we go bathtub curb, right? You spend the first, 35% of your time trying to figure out how to munge the data, execute some stuff, and then, the last 35% of your time or 40% of your time trying to figure out how to interpret it. I'm not sure, right, that whole class of line of thinking makes sense in this case, but I think the 0 to 1 problem gets an awful lot shorter for sure. So you can figure out how to flatten that first part, but the latter part of determining whether or not that's valuable and why it matters. I mean, still question marks there.
I would say one thing on behalf of the humble API: doesn't tend to hallucinate.
No, no, for sure not. But, we'll see how it comes out. All right. Let's take a break on that one. We're going to come back and talk about our third segment today. It's a Thin Lizzy song, Jailbreak. You're watching TechStrong Gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back and we're talking about jailbreaks. And yes, it is a Thin Lizzy song, and we dearly miss those folks, but that's another story for another time. But Fred, there's a thing called Crescendo, and there's a lot of different novel efforts to kind of get LLMs to cough up information that they're not supposed to. And the latest one, I think, is called Echo something or other. But it seems like this is a cascading series of discoveries that people are coming up with. And some were saying that this is actually not a bug, but just a flat out structural flaw of an LLM. What do you think?
Yeah, so it's interesting that we've now parlayed what this is, called the echo chamber attack is what we're talking about here specifically, but it's kind of AI social engineering. So same problem we have today in humans, right? Now what we're doing is where, the Crescendo story that Microsoft put out explains a little bit how you can think about starting with relatively innocent questions and sort of evolving that to, a harmful prompt, right? And then next thing you know, you've got poisonous seeds sort of influencing the outcomes. And some of those types of outcomes really can't be seen as a bug, right? It's just it's not a flaw in the reasoning process. It's a way to manipulate the reasoning, because all the models that we love dearly, right, are inference models. So you can see things like, all of OpenAI's models, right, and even Gemini's, 2.5 models are subject to this. Plenty of others are also. So Neural Trust came out with a methodology here that's very interesting. It's interesting because of the level of sophistication required, but also it's interesting because of the number of models it actually affects. So the vast majority of models, right, are affected by this, at least 40%. And then some of the ones we use every day, all the OpenAI models, that's up to 90. But the concept here is harmful prompts. Let me ask you how to build a Molotov cocktail. Sorry, can't do that. Okay, well, let me tell you what I know, a Molotov cocktail to look like, and then let me seed that, and then let me get some of the ways to interpret my seed with other questions, and the next thing you know, I'm now invoking this context that's probably not right, and then we've got some paths to go down the wherewithal of which direction we're going to go with the model, and I get an answer, right, step by step, how to build a Molotov cocktail. And this is not. This is not sort of a challenge that I think anybody thought we would not come across. There's a lot of, governance guardrails being put in the market today. But the challenge that we have here is that the pervasiveness of something like this to happen and the influence of things. When we look at the OpenAI requirements for security, right, not listed in there is context protection and disambiguating, malicious from good. So there are some interesting new definitions we're probably going to have to come up with to understand how to appropriately regulate this kind of behavior and to understand when it happens.
So can I say it's not a bug, it's a feature?
What?
It's classic. I mean, but, we spoke earlier today about ethical LLMs, ethical AI players. Again, we could try to build in better guardrails that'll prevent you being able to take this AI. To me, it's akin to putting age verification on porn sites. Are we really keeping kids under 18 from entering these sites? I don't know if there's a good answer for this. Not with present technology, and that's if you want to say, well, put the brakes on AI as a result. Good luck with that. That's not happening. This is going to be one of these classical security things where we'll care about it when people bitch about it loud enough. But right now, it's the bitching isn't loud enough.
So are the guardrails that we're coming up with worth the damn in the first place? And I mean, why? Maybe it's not just worth the effort, and we should just let people know that this can happen, and bad people are going to do bad things.
I think there's a bunch of parts coming out to talk about this, right? Where, whether it's, Google Secure AI Framework, it's OWASP's new, AI top 10 LLM concerns, Cloud Security Alliances. There's lots of people talking about what the potential implications are. But I think there's a really good point to be made here. That's great. However, the tools don't all exist to guardrail all of these things. And maybe we should quantify what the level of exploitation capability is first, and then work backwards. I think we're over pontificating about the implications without really understanding the consequences.
I also think it may differ by use case. I mean, imagine you're a financial services firm, and then people are teasing out information about your clients. Well, that's a bigger issue than maybe, some retailer somewhere. So, will this maybe reduce the appetite for using LLMs in certain use cases where there is a lot of sensitivity around the data? So it's theoretically possible.
Well, I think there's a conversation we had about, so if that's your risk, right? And Nicara put out this thing this week that talks about the AI model risk index. You'll notice we've talked about Anthropic's Claude 4.0 and where they sit on the security index a while back, but the risk index. If you're a large financial, right, or you are using something specifically to guard, I don't know, the Coke formula, right, then maybe the risk here for you is that is fundamentally too dangerous for us. We're going to implement our own model that's customized, very specific, has guardrails around it, and doesn't require you to use the foundation models in, a public cloud infrastructure or something like this. There's ways around it. I think quantifying what that actual risk is to you, this is a good indice for folks to look at is, if this is possible and that information is critical to me, then I've got to make different risk decisions, maybe about which model I use, which service I use, and how I weaponize that engine for my users' benefit.
Fair enough.
So I would think that, in a couple of months from now, though, when folks who experience that risk aren't paying attention right now are going to wake up one morning and there's going to be some sort of shocking piece of news that, will surprise them and will be for us. We'll be like, hey, we told you so. But I guess I'm wondering how long that might take, because I think the bad guys are getting really good at social engineering of LLMs. So I think, this may be popping up on, I don't know, the front page of the proverbial Wall Street Journal, as they used to say, 30 days from now. John, what's your bet?
Yes. When I heard social engineering and I heard AI, I was like, here it's real and it's happening, and we're going to read about it pretty soon. And that's always like the recurring theme among these companies in their rush. They know it's happening. They know that what the risk is involved, and they're willing to take it. So yes, Mike, it's a matter of time.
All right. I think that's going to, which sounds like we're a little out of steam here, but that probably means it's time to end the show, which is a good thing. I've got a busy day in front of me at PlatformCon, and as I said, it should all be available on any of the TechStrong TV outlets, YouTube, OTT, etc. Also, we've got a full TechStrong TV lineup immediately following today's gang show. But until then, Mike, safe travels home to New York. John, Fred, great to see you both. We'll see you soon on another episode. For now, on behalf of TechStrong Gang, this is Alan Schimmel. We're out.